Hey everyone, welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by yours truly, B-Man is Mad. A lot to get into. Notre Dame suffers their first defeat at home in over 25 games. Notre Dame snapped their 26-game winning streak against Cincinnati this past Saturday by the final score of 24-13. It was the second longest home winning streak in college football, and Notre Dame will have to start a new winning streak, I guess. And there were a lot of things that really pissed B-Man off in this game. There was a lot of things that we need to go over, but first of all, let's talk about Notre Dame's identity. Usually after about 2 or 3 games, you know what your team's identity is going into a season. And Notre Dame's identity for the 2021 season had finally been concreted and set in stone. And that is that Notre Dame has a very poor offensive line. It's going to be like this all year. I've said this all videos that Notre Dame could easily be 1-3 right now, or 2-3 right now. They should have lost to Florida State. They could have lost to Toledo, and of course they lost this past Saturday to Cincinnati. And they did not look very particular well against Wisconsin up until the late third quarter. There, Wisconsin is a terrible team, by the way. I mean, they just, I don't know what's happened up there in Madison. They fell off the cliff. It just, I have not been impressed with Notre Dame's wins this year. I've been very negative, and this game against Cincinnati showed all the problems with Notre Dame football here in 2021. And when you've been sacked over 14 times in 5 games, which 6 of them were against Wisconsin, which got your quarterback hurt a couple weeks ago, that indicates that your offensive line is terrible. Now, in the first 4 games of last year, Notre Dame had only allowed 4 sacks. This year in 2021, in the first 4 games, they allowed 14. So the identity of Notre Dame football here in 2021 is that they have a very bad, poor offensive line, and I'm trying to be as respectful as I can because these are college students. If this was an NFL, these were professional athletes, I'd be ripping into them right now, swearing and going crazy and throwing things like I do when I watch Notre Dame games. I cuss at the TV, and believe me, folks, you do not want to hear the cuss words I say because they're not pretty. I get angry. I get pissed. But Saturday, when Notre Dame lost that game, I already knew what Notre Dame's issues were. So I was kind of like calm. I was kind of, and this is going to be kind of a freaky analogy that I'm going to use here, but I was kind of like Jack in Titanic when he was laying up against the door when Rose was laying on it. I'm Jack, okay, and I'm sitting there, I'm getting cold, I'm dying. I know I'm going to die, but I know the person I love is safe. And eventually you just go to sleep and you pass away. That's how I am with Notre Dame football. I am comfortable with knowing what the issues are. I am comfortable with knowing that it's okay that they're going to lose a couple games this year because we clearly saw in the first 3 games what their issues are. Now, it is frustrating. You'd like to see Notre Dame be consistently good every year like Alabama or like Georgia, but they are not. Because like I've said 10 million times on this channel, that Georgia and Alabama are here, and here is Cincinnati, and here is the rest of college football, and Notre Dame is right here. Notre Dame is not at an elite level. Okay, maybe Notre Dame's a little bit above the basement, but you get my drift. I've said it 100 times on here, but I am okay. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. A man at the level of my education. I guess I am just comfortable. I'm like Jack laying there knowing everything's going to be okay because the person I love is going to be okay, and she's going to be able to live her life and have children. And, after she gets saved by the ship that, I don't know, I think it was called the Carpathia, which got sunk by a U-2 sub during World War II, actually. I guess you didn't know that. That's a history lesson for you folks. But I'm comfortable with knowing that Notre Dame's offensive line is terrible. I am comfortable knowing that Notre Dame is not Alabama or Notre Dame is not Georgia. And it's funny to compare them in the same conversation. Okay, at least this year and the next couple of years to come. Now, the frustrating thing about this season, and Joe Klatt the analyst for Fox Sports last week against Wisconsin said the same thing that Drew Brees has been saying at home is Notre Dame needs to use Michael Mayer more. Notre Dame needs to target their big time receivers. They need to target Austin Jr. They need to target Michael Mayer, especially the tight end Michael Mayer. Drew Brees said this at least 16 different times during this game, and they did target Michael Mayer and their star players and their key receivers throughout that first drive very, very good and consistently. That first drive of the game where Notre Dame went down the field 70 yards, and guess what happened? Jack Cohen throws off his back foot, throws an interception at the goal line. Cincinnati takes over. That was a defining of the game right there, and that's been the issue for Notre Dame right there. The offensive line caused him to throw off the back of his foot in a hurry. He should have took the sack. I mean, come on, you would have been sacked at least 4 more times in the game up until Brian Kelly took you out and replaced you with Drew Pine. And what I loved about that first drive is that they mixed it up. They went from a quarterback draw to a slant pass to a bubble screen to a wide receiver screen. They went down that field. They were mixing it up to a run here and there and a pass. It looked great. Even Drew Brees and Mike Tirico had mentioned it. And they went away with that. They went away with that after that first drive. It's like they experiment with something, they don't like it, and they go away with it, which they should have stuck with it. And it was very frustrating to watch because Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees do this all the time. They should have continued with the same game plan. But when you have a poor offensive line, it's very difficult to do that. But then we go back to the comfortable feeling sitting there in the water, dying with the love of your life, okay, up on the door, that you're comfortable knowing that there's going to be some issues here. But it's still frustrating to watch your team suck. It's still frustrating to watch your team commit 3 turnovers because Notre Dame was in this game. I don't care what that score was at halftime. And I'm not making excuses here and being delusional, but Notre Dame was in that game. They came back. It was 17-13. Cincinnati gave them so many opportunities. Cincinnati gave them, here, we'll give you the keys, take over this game, win it. Notre Dame shot themselves in the foot too many times, hence the reason why Cincinnati won this game. Cincinnati is a good team, but they're not a great team. I see a lot of flaws with Cincinnati. They seem like they're a very undisciplined team. They commit too many turnovers, a little cocky, a little lippy. I guess that's okay when you beat a big-time school like Notre Dame. Not a powerhouse, but you know what I mean. And they deserved it. You can go ahead and flap your jaw, and there's nothing Notre Dame fans or nothing Notre Dame players can do because you lost that game, and you just got to move on to Virginia Tech this weekend out in Blacksburg. But just continue with the mixing it up on offense, please, Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees. I'd like to see that. And please, love of God, would you please keep Drew Pine in there? He is the best option that you have. No one else. Jack Cohen, I just don't know what his issue is. I don't know if he can't contain with the speed of the defenses coming after him because the offensive line can't hold and he's getting sacked. I don't know if he has no confidence. I don't know what the issue is. He doesn't get the ball out quick enough. He doesn't have happy feet like Tyler Buckner does, and even Drew Pine. He was a lacrosse and he was pretty athletic. Cohen was, but there's just something in his clock, something mentally wrong in his head that is causing him to be fridgy and not throw that ball out quick enough, and it's causing him to get sacked. And 90% of that is because of the offensive line as well. Don't get me wrong. And I hope Saturday, when the game starts at 6:30 Central Time on the ACC Network, when Notre Dame's out in Blacksburg and Virginia Tech, Drew Pine comes out and is the Notre Dame quarterback, and maybe they'll make some adjustments, and maybe they'll target Michael Mayer more, and they'll have some more wide receiver screens or quarterback draw plays or something like they did in that first drive against Cincinnati, because that first drive against Cincinnati, up until that turnover, was absolutely beautiful. But the bad offensive line, ugly head, stuck his head up and looked around and caused an interception, and folks, it was not a pretty game. And like I said, being like Jack, when you know it's the end, it's okay. It is okay when you know your team is not going to be that good this year. And the funny thing is, after the game, I flipped over to ESPN to hear ESPN's opinion about the game, and Kirk Herbstreit for ESPN, I don't even know if I say his name right, said that Notre Dame could still win 10 games this year. I I think he was reaching a little too far. I think he was just trying to beef up the win for Cincinnati. Look, Cincinnati did a good job. They weren't great. They weren't crisp. They didn't look like a gangbuster team like Georgia or Bama, or they made some mistakes. They were penalized. They had a couple turnovers. I think they're a beatable team. There's only 100% elite. I hate to use that word, and that's Alabama. We all know that, and maybe Georgia, because Georgia looks like they're getting better every weekend. But I know that Cincinnati played Georgia last year in their bowl game and played them tough, and Georgia ended up winning that game by a field goal. But I think this year will be different depending on how the playoffs, end up. If somehow Georgia and Alabama and Cincinnati get in there somehow, and Georgia does play Cincinnati in that semifinal game, I think it's going to be a different story. So hats off to Cincinnati. You deserved it. I know where Notre Dame's identity is. I'm comfortable with it. I like to see Michael Mayer more targeted, more than that in that first drive throughout the game. He's your star player. He's quick. He's one of the best tight ends in college football. It seems like the last couple of years, Notre Dame has developed some good tight ends. You need to keep him in your game plan, and also throw the ball more to Austin Jr. He's a heck of a kid, great receiver, has a lot of speed. Let's get into my rant that I'm really ticked about, because I've seen Notre Dame do this 3 times in my lifetime, and they've all been teams with the red color. Back in 2000, Notre Dame played Nebraska. Everybody thought Nebraska was going to run all over Notre Dame. All the experts thought it was going to be a blowout. 3 touchdowns. Notre Dame had no chance playing against Nebraska. They shouldn't even be in the same level. Notre Dame fans felt the same way. Nebraska's colors are red and white. I don't know exactly what color red they call it, but they have solid red colors. And Notre Dame fans thought the same thing the national media thought, that they were going to get slaughtered by Nebraska. And what happened? About 50%, maybe even more, of the stadium was all red, and it was all Nebraska fans. And Notre Dame fans had sold their tickets to traveling Nebraska fans because they felt that they had no chance. That really pisses me off as a fan. I might harp on Notre Dame. I might be negative towards them. I might criticize them too much. I might be pessimistic. I might be a Debbie Downer. I might gripe all the time. But there's one thing that I will never do, and that is sell my tickets to an opposing team. Because if I were ever to sell my tickets to a Michigan fan that came into Notre Dame when I thought Notre Dame was bad, and I did that to my team as an embarrassment, then you should not be a fan of your team, especially against, if you're going to fill up your home stadium with opposing fans. No, you don't do that. And this is not the first time Notre Dame has done this. Let's fast forward the clocks to 2017. Same thing. Everybody thought Georgia was going to come into South Bend and blow out Notre Dame. Notre Dame ended up losing that game by 1. Notre Dame had a chance to win that game. A big majority of the stadium was all red. Georgia, red and white. Another team that wears a solid red color. Again, why do fans do this? Why do you guys do this? Why do Notre Dame fans do this? I understand you want to make money. I get it. But you have tickets, and you're like, oh, I really don't want to watch Notre Dame blow out. But here's a suggestion. I've heard other YouTubers talk about this, and I will piggyback off of that. Is sell your tickets to a Notre Dame fan. Sell your tickets to a coworker that likes college football, or sell your tickets to a family member, or brother and sister, or a wife's friend, or a wife's husband that loves college football, who can't afford to go to a game, or who is always working, or who has kids and doesn't have a lot of free time. But don't sell it to a person of that caliber who hates Notre Dame. Never. I would never take a person to a Notre Dame game with me who hates them. Why would you do that? And you did it this week, and it wasn't as bad as it was against Georgia in 2017 and Nebraska in 2000. But there was a lot of red, and I understand Cincinnati played a better game than Notre Dame, and Cincinnati was trying to prove something, and they were cocky, and they were amped up. Good for them. They won the game. They deserve it. But when you're in your home stadium, and the game is close, when Notre Dame was down 17-13 after that missed extra point, you could still hear the Cincinnati fans, and as a Notre Dame fan, that pisses me off. You know how hard it is to get Notre Dame tickets to these games, how expensive it is? And by the way, I am going to a game November 30th against North Carolina, and if something, God forbid, does come up, I will not sell these tickets or give them away to a non-Notre Dame fan because that's the stupidest thing you can do. But it really pisses me off that people do that. Show some loyalty, okay? Be a fan. Sell it to another fan. And that just really pisses me off because it shows you where Notre Dame football is at. This is an embarrassment. When I was a kid, from 1987 to 1993, that was the golden era of Notre Dame football. If someone would have came for me from the future and said, hey, B-Man, I know you're a young kid, but about 30 years from now, Notre Dame fans are going to sell their tickets to Georgia fans because they don't think they're going to win. I'd be like, what the F is going on in the future? It's complete bullshit, folks. Be positive. Go into that game thinking your team's going to win. Even if you don't think they're going to win, go to the game and watch it. If you can't go, then sell it to your local friend or a neighbor or a Notre Dame fan. Never the opposing team, never the enemy. Because I would roll over in my grave years from now when I'm dead and B-Man's buried. I'm going to roll over in my grave if this ever happens to Michigan. Let's say 2070, Notre Dame's playing Michigan, and Notre Dame's terrible and Michigan's good. And it's all Michigan fans compared to Notre Dame fans. I will roll over in my grave, and every Notre Dame fan should roll over in their grave, and every Notre Dame fan should roll over their grave that's dead on Saturday and in 2017 and back in 2000 because it really pisses me off. It really does. Be a fan. Show support. That is it for today, folks. Hit that like button. Hit the thumbs down button. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And we'll talk to you on the next post-game show when Notre Dame takes on Virginia Tech out in Blacksburg. Everyone, thank you again. And, of course, go Irish.